Dr. Jazz.
I had many tours years ago with Paul McCandless. I think you played with Paul.
Yes.
I remember, like, Paul was one of the few guys when you're on tours that I asked him so much about the 70s and 80s, playing with Jaco and all this stuff. And I was like a small kid driving a van, and Paul was just like there, like, yeah, then we went to there. So that's how I'm feeling now. So
I first heard Paul. Well, it was interesting. The first album I saw a photo of him on was with the Paul Winter Consort.
Oh yeah.
He was in the band when they took the photo. He was not in the studio when they made that album. But I was immediately struck. He just kind of stood out in the photo because he has. In English, we use that expression, fierce intelligence, and
that's a good one.
And he does have a level of fierceness to his or intensity to just to his being, I think, and of course to his playing, because I think to be able to play what he plays on a double reed instrument.
Yeah.
It's easy to overlook or forget how impossible it is what he does. I mean, he actually is an incredible musician, and Jaco was always drawn to incredible musicians. So even though Paul was not known as a tenor player, Jaco was certain that he had to have Paul McCandless playing in his band. So Paul was part of that, I don't want to say ill-fated, but kind of mixed-fated tour of Japan, the final tour that we did with that Word of Mouth Big Band. Anyway, I'm sorry, I hijacked the discussion.
No.
About Paul, but go ahead, please ask what you want.
But you guys played together also with Jelena Ekimov, right? Later, I think.
Yes, with Jelena, that was the most recent time.
Yeah.
We did jam sessions when I lived in New York.
Yeah.
And some gigs just north of Manhattan. I produced an album in the it was either the late 1980s or like 1990 of a vocalist named Ann Hills, wonderful singer, and I'd known Ann since we were high school students, 14 and 15 years old at the Interlochen Arts Academy.
Oh.
And Ann invited me to produce this recording, and I introduced her to Vince Mendoza, and this was one of the earlier vocal projects that Vince worked on. He decided, I basically got James Taylor's rhythm section, which was obviously a smart move. I couldn't get Don Grolnick, but a wonderful keyboard player named Jim Cox.
Yeah.
But Bob Mann was playing guitar with James at the time. Jimmy Johnson was playing bass, and Carlos Vega was playing drums. I've often mentioned that Carlos is the only drummer I've hired because I couldn't think of anyone better. And he did do a stunning job on the album. So Vince decided it would be great to have Paul McCandless, and Vince wrote some multi woodwind parts for Paul to play, and Paul flew down from the San Francisco area and was just incredible. And in fact, I don't know if this is the format of your podcast, but
please.
I wonder if, now I'm doing I'll show you my setup in a bit.
Oh yeah, please.
Uh, okay. Listen to this. This features Vince's writing and Paul McCandless. I'll play this for you. I'll turn off my voice mic.
Oh, please.
Okay.
The Dutchman's not the kind of man to keep his thumb jammed in the dam that holds his dreams in. But that's a secret only Margaret knows. When Amsterdam is golden in the morning, Margaret brings him breakfast. She believes him. He thinks the tulips bloom beneath the snow. He's mad as he can be, but Margaret only sees that sometimes. Sometimes she sees her unborn children in his eyes. Let us go to the banks of the ocean, where the walls rise above the Zuider Zee. Long ago I used to be a young man, and dear Margaret remembers that for me. The Dutchman still wears wooden shoes, his cap and coat are patched with love that Margaret sewed in. Sometimes he thinks he's still in Rotterdam. He watches tugboats down canals, and he calls out to them when he thinks he knows the captain. Till Margaret comes to bring him home again, through unforgiving streets that trip him though she holds his arm. Sometimes he thinks that he's alone and calls her name. Let us go to the banks of the ocean, where the walls rise above the Zuider Zee. Long ago I used to be a young man, and dear Margaret remembers that for me. Windmills whirl the winter in. She winds his muffler tighter. They sit in the kitchen. Some tea with whiskey keeps away the dew, and he sees her for a moment, calls her name. She makes the bed up humming Samo love song. She learned it when the tune was very new. He hums a line or two. They hum together in the night. The Dutchman falls asleep, and Margaret blows the candle out. Let us go to the banks of the ocean, where the walls rise above the Zuider Zee. Long ago I used to be a young man, and dear Margaret remembers that for me. Let us go to the banks of the ocean, where the walls rise above the Zuider Zee. Long ago I used to be a young man, and dear Margaret remembers that for me.
he's for me one of the nicest musicians I ever got to play with, like as a person. So, and you know,
he's a heavy guy, you know.
yeah.
I would play you more, but
Oh no, thanks for
listen to the whole album. But yeah, it's
I'll definitely check it out.
You can imagine the fun of you know, we were doing this rather quickly, and Anne trusted me. I said, this is going to be great. And then Paul put on one part, and then he put on the next part, and I'm looking at Vince like, my goodness, how clever you are, you know. And you know, I've had that experience a lot of times with Vince in the studio when we would add some of his orchestration. It was interesting. We did an album. Of course, one of our better-known collaborations was with Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, sounds very
Sides Now album.
Like.
But we did an album with another wonderful singer named Mary Chapin Carpenter, and that album's called Songs from the Movie. And Vince didn't have a French horn section. There was a string orchestra. And he had small woodwinds and trombones and tuba. And so a couple of trombone players were expecting that this would be a repeat of the Joni album. And they're waiting for that to kick in. And it didn't. And anyway, by the end of the first day, one of the trombonists came up to me. And he said, I have to confess, at first, we were a little bit disappointed because we were expecting, you know, a different level of complexity, and he said all of a sudden we looked at each other and we realized that the way that Vince had orchestrated the lower brass and he, just the in his words, he said the overtones that were being created because of the voicings, and then how that changed their whole center of pitch. And he said they were even more dazzled because of the starkness and the simplicity, and what it was demanding from them as players in terms of intonation and stuff. And these are, you might not think a drummer would be interested in that, but these are the things that interest me: how pitch affects the music and the subtleties of pitch are very similar to the subtleties in rhythm.
Yeah.
And what makes something moving. So in other words, we could listen. I've started doing this thing on Facebook. And it was I think Antonio Sanchez, I nominate Peter Erskine to list 10
Oh
tracks.
yeah, that thing, yeah.
That thing. And then I said, well, 10 tracks is not enough. So I said, I'm going to be my own disc jockey, and I'm going to list 50 recordings. And after about 4 or 5 of them, I realized that's not going to be enough. So I said, I'm changing it to 100. And before I got halfway through that, I announced, say hello to the infinity list.
Yeah.
So now I'm up to 180 something, almost 190. And I see no end in sight because there's so many wonderful drumming performances. But a lot of the obvious choices that most people would think, like, oh, this is the most impressive, or this is are not the ones that I'm listing, and not because I want to be different, but because so many drum things are really boring to me.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
They're just like. So it's fun turning people on. The ultimate goal, I think, is just to show that if you're a drummer, at least, there's a place for you in this universe, because every drummer, if they can play a good beat honestly, they're a valuable member of the world community. So I think ultimately that's kind of been my goal with this. But on the higher level of things, it's this push and pull and the finding of center. And of course, as a guitarist, you must appreciate that, especially if you have a 12-string.
I do. I love it. No, but I could detour now to Ralph Town and run out easily, since you guys did one of that duo record, which is amazing. But I just want to catch you here, like with one thing you said, like what a drummer does and expectations you mentioned, and you've done so many sessions as a drummer, as a collaborator or a side person, however we want to. I prefer the term collaborator because
drummer
works. Yeah, because each musician brings so much to the music. That's serve the music is the idea, I guess, especially with you. But
I appreciate that, Samo. But years ago, my teacher, who was a university professor at Indiana University, and I was still. I was 12 years old, and I was using the term percussionist. And he laughed. He said, "You're a drummer." He said, "I'm a drummer. We're drummers." It's okay to call yourself a drummer. And
drummer.
That always stuck with me. I was like, "Yeah, we're drummers."
But okay, as you as a drummer, and you mentioned expectations, like. And, you've done so many of these sessions where you've been called to do, like, what were your expectations? Let's say sometimes when people you didn't know called you, like, how did you deal with those situations? Like,
well, I mean, how I deal with it now, if someone says, would you like, would you add drums to, because we're all recording from home.
Yeah.
I'll usually say, I'm interested to discuss this. Please send me the music so I can be confident that I'll be the right drummer for you. And part of that is a tactful or gentle way of me being able to say sorry.
Yeah.
But in reality, Samo, it's a lot of times I'm not the right drummer for a project, and I don't want to invest my time or musical energy if I recognize that this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And I've done things. I did a thing for one musician, and now I'm very specific. If someone sends me something, I say, I'll listen to it. I'll discuss with you. The more specific you can be about what you want. I'll do a take. I'll send it to you. If you send me back notes within a certain amount of time, I'll do my best to honor those. I'll give you a second take, and that's it. There's no punching in. There's no fine-tuning it to because you've gotten married to your demo, or something.
Yeah, sure.
But so I was very excited about this track I had done for this guy, and he said, "Well, I don't like that one. Why did you play that one fill there?" And I said, "Well, because it's a transit, I said, "But you have two takes. I mean, you can easily."
Yeah.
And he's like, and I felt like I'd given a gift to someone, and now they were doubting it.
Yeah.
And I stopped him. I said, "You know what? I'm sorry. This has been a mistake. You don't owe me any money. You're not getting the track. It's been nice talking to you. I'll see you later." And I said, I'm not going to give it to him.
Yeah.
So now I have this really great drum track, and I don't know what to do with it. But you want it?
But I find that, to be honest, like as a band leader as well, or a composer, I find that weird, because you usually write. I wanted to ask you also that, but from my perspective, you usually write for musicians you know you're gonna write. You know, when I played with Paul, let's say, I knew I was gonna have Paul, so I know how he sounds, and I wrote music that I knew he would blend in like perfectly. So it's funny that people then, you know.
And you want him to take the chances. You want him to go, whoa, wow, I didn't expect that, you know. I whenever I'm producing or something, oh, wow, cool, great. You know, I don't second guess what people play if I trust them in the first place to work with them, to collaborate with them.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't have a firm idea of what it is they want, and also the demo thing. You know, in the old days, I had gotten very skillful, quite adept at sequencing, and now I barely ever sequence anything. It's pencil and paper. And if I give a piece of music, someone say, play this, my reaction almost is always, great, thank you. You know, now, and it's funny because one of the first sessions, I was on an album that Herbie Hancock was on. I recorded the Mingus album with Herbie here. That's a photo from
man,
Joni Mitchell.
Which year? That's like
that's 1978.
78, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man.
So not too long after that, I had done some work on an album with Michel Colombier, and Herbie was brought in to overdub. And they play it for him. He listens. They've set up his little mini Moog in the studio. And these are the days when people are like, oh, let's punch in here and change it to this or change it to that. And Herbie pointedly turned to the tape operator, the engineer, and said, I'm going to give you 2 passes on this. Make sure you record both of them. Which was his announcement that there'll be no punching in. I'm not going to do it more than twice. And let's go. Have fun. And I wondered, do you know the name Michel Colombier?
Yeah, but not his music.
Okay. Then let's listen to something. I think you'll enjoy this. Here we okay. Let's listen to this first. This is myself, Lee Rittenauer is playing guitar, and Michel Colombier is playing electric piano. Herbie overdubbed the synthesizer, okay? And you also hear Michael Brecker.
Oh, okay. That's burning.
That was fun. So
who's on bass? It's like some like Louis Johnson-ish, almost like this.
it sounds like Louis. It's not. Let me look that up. I think his name is Red. So I'm going to show you my setup. So just so you see what I'm.
Yeah.
I'm over here. I'm just typing this in. The sound of one finger typing. So I have a multi-camera setup, and I've put this together for teaching at USC. So that's my front kind of master camera. I have a second master. It's not hooked up right now, but that runs on a track, so I can do pan and scan with that. I have a ride cymbal special. I have a true overhead.
Yeah.
And then I can focus on the bass drums, pedals, the snare drum if I want, and so my setup, I've got 2 iPads here, one for audio, one for video. There you are, and that's my master monitor, so I can see what the cameras are doing. This is my studio.
So that's where you record also, like for recordings?
Yep.
Wow.
I'm using this drum set here. I've got a very nice setup. And then my main music computer is behind that wall. So the audio is processed there. I've got a lovely piano there.
Yeah,
and so let me see. If I went to
amazing.
Michel Colombier, I wonder if it'll mention the album. I'll look that up. I should remember his name. I apologize. He was terrific. He played on that tune. The other tune we did that day, they wound up overdubbing Jaco. Michelle flew to Florida.
Wow.
I'll play you a little bit of that.
Yeah, please.
Because today is Sunday, and that song is called Sunday.
Love that. Man, those feels like what he does. It's like like on you know like.
Yeah, well, that was Jaco. You know the key to Jaco, and Alex Acuna gave me the key, and he said listen to what Jaco's playing. He said it's wawanko conga drum patterns on the bass. He said that's kind of the whole. I don't want to say secret, but he said that really is kind of the building block of what Jaco's doing. So he had the pointillism of not only James Jamerson and I think Francis Rocco Presley. I think Rocco was an influence on Jaco.
Yeah.
But Jaco filtered it through this whole South Florida thing. The bass player, and I apologize for having forgotten his name, was Jerry Knight.
Jerry Knight, yeah.
Jerry Knight. He passed away in 1996. Was so young.
Wow.
But yeah, I was really thrilled. I was like, wow, this guy's really funky. You know, it was fun.
That's a tricky tune you guys played, like some 15 in between 7, 8, like this Sunday.
Yeah, I don't know,
like really, I was just like, wow, okay. Amazing, beautiful.
But we did. We did. That was actually my first LA session. I think. You know, I did that just before moving to LA after I joined Weather Report. I mean, the Mingus thing aside, that was the Michel Colombier recording. For those watching, Michel Colombier spelled Colombier.
Yeah.
His album titled Wings is just a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'll check it out definitely.
Yeah, it's incredible. But this album was called Michel Colombier, and as a guitarist, not only does Lee Ritenour play great on, but there's a couple of Larry Carlton tracks that are pretty astonishing.
I love it. You know that album? When I started with jazz, I found out about Larry Carlton, right? And there's this album Hejira by Joni Mitchell, and
of course,
and Jaco plays, of course, on it, and that's how I discovered Jaco. You know, I didn't know, and I was like, "What is this bass?" You know, like it's like Black Crow, and he's like the harmonics, and it's just like
magical music. It was really something. And
you remember the first time?
I'm sorry.
You remember the first time you guys like played together? How was that for you?
Well, I remember meeting him, 1977. I was on the road with Maynard Ferguson, early 1977, and he played us a cassette of final mixes of Heavy Weather. And I remember telling him, I said, Jaco, this is the version of Weather Report I've been waiting for. And I also picked up Hejira. And so that whole spring, that's all I was listening to. It was just Jaco. The first time we played together was at the very first rehearsal with the band. They contacted me, and I was in the middle of touring with Maynard, and the logistics wouldn't work. So I turned them down, which oddly I think made an impression on them. They were intrigued that I turned them down. And Jaco kept insisting, just based on having heard me one time, that I was the cat. So they needed a drummer to go to Japan. When they contacted me a second time, of course, I didn't turn it down. I decided I had to go for it. And it's a funny story. Normally, and after having been on the Stan Kenton big band for 3 years and Maynard Ferguson's big band for almost 2 years, I was a sideman. I was a big band guy. Show me the music. What do you want played? I'll play it. And Weather Report was, of course, a different kind of a beast. I flew out to Hollywood, where Jaco and I, the plan was we would meet that evening. And I can't find him anywhere at the hotel. Now, the hotel was not too far from a place called the Club Roxy on Sunset Boulevard. It's a famous, more or less like rock showcase club. And I found out later, Jaco told me that he had been invited to go see Billy Cobham. They were doing a record release party. He had just signed to Columbia, and so Jaco was seated at this long table in front of the bandstand. Other CBS artists, including Stanley Clarke, and Jaco said there was a big bowl of fruit and grapes and raisins and cashews and that as Billy was playing his solo. Billy had a very large drum set, cymbals high up in the air. They were throwing grapes, trying to hit Billy's drumsticks during his solo. and I thought maybe Jaco was only joking, but I asked Stanley about it later, and Stanley said, "No, man, that's true. We actually were doing that." Anyway, so I can't find Jaco. I just spent the night alone, had dinner and went to bed and got up early. Of course, I was excited. And I had a new drum set, so I decided to walk to the rehearsal space. It was a place called Studio Instrument Rentals, SIR. And maybe 3 or 4 kilometers distance from the hotel, I think. But I had a lot of energy, and so I walked there. And I'm there maybe 2-3 hours before the start of the rehearsal, and I'm setting up the drums, tuning them. I get to meet the road crew, and then one of the tour managers or somebody came said, "Peter, the guys called. They're going to be a couple hours late." Oh, okay, fine. So instead of 1 o'clock now, it's 3 o'clock, and then he comes over. He goes, "Sorry, they're going to be a couple more hours late." So they finally show up about 7 o'clock at night for a 1 o'clock rehearsal. So I've been there all afternoon. They walk in together, so they must have met outside in the parking lot. Zavanel has a dried up marijuana bit of in English we call it a roach, stuck to his lower lip, and he's looking at me, kind of looking me up and down, and kind of glum. He shakes my hand. Wayne is very friendly, lovely smile, and hey, and then Jaco kind of waves at the door, and then leaves. Joe is ignoring me now, and he goes up to and he's playing with his synthesizers. And again, if this had happened at 1 o'clock, I'm sure I would have waited to receive instructions. Yeah. But now I'm so bored, so I just walked up to the drums, and I started playing. And Joe looked kind of surprised, and he's digging it, so he starts playing. And then Wayne joined us, so the 3 of us are playing, just jamming. And I see Jaco at the far end of this rehearsal stage, and he has a 6-pack of Heineken beer, and he walks in with his beer, and he sees this, and he gets a huge smile on his face, kind of like this is what he was hoping would happen. Mm. So. Because it was on his recommendation that they hired me. So he puts the beer in a refrigerator, jumps up on the stage it wasn't such a high stage. And Samo, he turns to his left. It's like this. He jumps up, he turns to his left, and a bass comes flying in the air. And he catches it with one hand, straps it around his back, and he starts playing. So we do an impromptu about 40-minute medley of Weather Report music. And I remember at one point looking out, and there was Tom Scott just standing there. Jaco had invited him, and Tom's there with his mouth open, just like that. So I said, maybe that's a good sign, you know. And we end up on this song, Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Boop, boop, boop,
Yeah,
boop, ba-da, boop, 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 ba-da-da, do, 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 do. You know, blah, 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 on and on. And then Joe finally gives the universal kind of, you know, boop, 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 bop, boop, bop. So, you know, that wasn't too hard to read, the signal. And so we end, and the three of them start laughing, you know, and high-fiving. So I take that to be a very good sign. Now, Jaco, let's see. Joe says, we don't need to rehearse, but come back tomorrow. Let's meet at whatever, 11 o'clock so we can take a band photo. That I take that to be a good sign. Jaco says, come on, man. So now this is the start of a very long night. I'm hanging out with Jaco, and some point we go to I think we go to Tom Scott's house, and then Michel Colombier shows up, and there's a little bit of a jam session there, and then we go to some other house, and there's Steve Gadd, and so Gadd and Jaco are talking, and I'm so naive, I can't understand. Wow, how can these guys stay up so late, and why are they talking so much? So anyway, the next morning, Jaco and I meet for breakfast. He takes me to a place where Tom Waits would always, where he stayed and always had his breakfast. I forget, there was some landmark. And then he takes me clothes shopping. He says, come on, we got to get you some better clothes. So we do clothes shopping, and then we go to the studio, and we pose for the band's first photo. And I find out, you know, I am going to Japan with the band.
Yeah.
And then once that tour was finished, they asked me to join the band.
Oh.
For real. And I don't know if I have a photo of the very first tour with Jaco. I know I do somewhere. But anyway, speaking of Jaco, there he is. That's in Japan. He used to love to play baseball. There are always baseball games going on.
Yeah. Amazing.
And that was always good fun. Yeah. Oh, here. This was from the first tour. Here we are on the train, and I'm playing them something. Who knows what?
So cool.
So
oh man,
we had a lot of fun. It was tremendous fun, and I learned, you know, more in that experience, and you know, good memories from it, from that. Joe was not the easiest person to work alongside, but I think I lasted longer. I know I lasted longer than any other drummer in the band. My stubbornness. Well, I didn't want to leave in part because I knew that they all knew more about this than I did, and so I resisted the easy, relatively easy route of like, oh, I'll just go home.
Yeah.
I said, I got to stick this out, and there's still more to learn. And then, you know how it is. You learn things, and then you have to unlearn some of what you learned, so you can get beyond that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, then I moved to New York, and we were talking about Paul McCandless. Paul was one of the first guys I got to play with outside of the circle musicians that, you know, that brought me to New York in the first place, which was Steps. Michael Brecker, Mike Minieri, Don Grolnick, Eddie Gomez. So I think that gig with Paul might have been the first time I got to work with Mark Johnson.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We played. It was some club,
Wow.
I think in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think the guitar and it was Ross Trout.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, he put the gig together. It was Ross,
Paul.
Paul, Mark, and myself, and yeah, we drove up to Poughkeepsie and did the gig, and that was one of my first freelance gigs in Manhattan. I remember that.
Yeah, Ross is on the first records of Paul, exactly, in the early 80s.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, makes sense. Such a good player.
Small world.
Yeah, no, amazing. That's so cool, man. But I wanted to ask you, Peter, just this, like, okay, you played like with Weather Report and you came to New York, and when was the moment that you decided I want to become a band leader, and what did that experience, let's say, working with Joe? You said he was like a heavy cat to work with, but like, how did it translate to you becoming a band leader and learning how to do that?
I made an album for the Contemporary record label. It was my first, and really it was at the invitation of the producer John Koenig, whose father Lester Koenig had created the label. And John showed tremendous faith, and we did an album. And it was quite daunting, being a leader for the first time. I found it a bit overwhelming. The only other time I found being a leader overwhelming was the first ECM recording I did, because that when you're the leader, that definitely puts you right in the line of fire. That's
with John Taylor and
Palle Danielsson.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite band of yours. Like, really.
Oh well, thank you. But
but
Manfred is uncompromising. He's a bit Machiavellian in his. I don't even want to say producing techniques, but just his interactive, human living techniques, I think, and sometimes to good effect. You know. But I've likened for all the recording I had done, and it wasn't that much up to that point, but I'd spent a fair amount of time in the studio. When it's your own album, there's so many other things. It's like directing a film. I mean, you're concerned about the budget, you're concerned about the chemistry, the vibe. You're very sensitive to every musician's facial expression, their body language, and how well are you communicating your ideas? I just said something really stupid. Where's the food? This guy just said something stupid to him. I got to make sure he's okay. And this guy doesn't want to play a solo all of a sudden. I mean, and what's funny, in the old days, I have a video my father made. We're doing a Mike Stern album. I think it was the Time and Place album.
Time and Place, yeah.
And on one of the tunes, we're talking about how many courses Mike can play, because it's going to be the third tune on the first side, and the other two tunes had already been recorded, and so it can't be over, 6.5 minutes. And we timed out the length of each course, and that Mike said, "Well, I'd like to play more, but if I do more than 4, then Bob, you only get 2." And Bob said, "I'm fine with 2. Okay, then I'll do 4." And then he would forget and play more, and then, well, it was a good take, but we can't use it because it's too long. And, there were a lot before compact disc came on the scene. It was like a thing. I think what I learned from Joe didn't manifest quite so much during the first album. I think some of my work with steps. I was able to bring some of the Weather Report studio manner or technique.
Mhm.
And it was different from what those guys were used to, and always soloing, never soloing. So trying to bring some of that ethos to the works. But the one of the I learned two really great things from Joe. I learned a lot of things from Joe, but one of them had to do with composing. And I would, as I mentioned earlier, I would write on the keyboard, and with the early sequencing, it was the best way for me to get ideas and this additive process. I'm not a very good keyboard player, and Joe was being gentle and actually supportive, and he said, "I like your writing, man. You write in the Viennese tradition, whatever that meant." But I found that encouraging. He said, you like this key or you like that key? And I said, of course. I'm a drummer. Of course, I like the key of C. He said, try writing in keys you're not comfortable in. Write in F sharp.
Yeah.
Write in D flat, because he said, if nothing else, just by accident, you're gonna play a chord that's just gonna whoa, and it'll take you where you would not go, because otherwise you're just gonna fall back into your 2-5-1s and So it's funny. I was working with a student the other day. I have a bass student, and of course, I run into Ron Carter. I've known Ron since I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And no wonder I couldn't find it. That was the wrong. All right, so I ran into Ron, and I mentioned, Ron, I have a couple of bass students at the University of Southern California, and he goes, "What does a drummer teach to a bass student?" And I said, well, for starters, I teach them to listen to more George Duvivier, who I knew Ron loved. And this photo was taken right after I said that.
the right answer.
Yeah, that's the right answer. But okay, so so check this out. So I'm working with this bass student, and we're talking about composing.
And for love's sake.
And I tell him about getting out of the tonal centers, or just that's and I for some reason I'm just thinking like when Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays would do a thing. What would be the most bracing moment when when you're listening to something? It's when they when they change the tonal center.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's just like, wow, it's and again it's what we were talking about rhythmically. It's all tension and release.
Yeah.
If I were to compare that just on a Philly Joe Jones, right? That's that's a thing that he would do. So he's going across the grain, and then the release. Now the other things that I learned from one thing I learned from Joe was about not moving part of your body that wasn't related to what you were playing. You saw my legs bouncing. What's going on with that? But a thing I learned from both him and Wayne, and this was early on. We're in the studio. They're mixing the live album, the 830 album.
Yep.
It's a live band studio.
Yeah.
And on one part of the tune Black Market, I'm playing in duet with Wayne Shorter. I used to always pinch myself. What am I? Me playing duet with Wayne? Come on. And this particular night, I'm Wayne's playing and I'm playing. And I stand next to Joe. We're by the speaker, and Joe turns to me and goes, "Sounds good." So I'm feeling like, all right. And then Wayne does this sequential. So I catch, I'd heard all the Miles records. So, hey, I'm listening. I got big ears. Zavino immediately turns to me with a very sour look and goes, "Too bad you had to do that." And eventually I learned that, if the soloist is playing and we have the blue background, and the soloist cuts a brilliant orange diagonal through that, that's not the moment for us to go, "Okay, everybody, orange, change to orange."
Yeah.
The orange works because it's in contrast with the blue.
Yeah.
And then you get the release. So the counterpoint of not only textures, but learning that listening is not just always responding, but listening is sometimes just paying attention.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I told my wife that we'd be speaking for an hour, and so she's prepared a lunch for me.
Sure. No, I had so many questions about
it must be your dinner time.
Oh, we ate like at 7, so it's cool. But
sorry.
Thanks so much for.
Do we have time for one more question? Do you have one more you want?
Yeah, I'm like, I just want to, my favorite trio of yours is like with John Taylor. John Taylor is one of my favorite underrated musicians ever and composers. But I just go the other way because I wanted to ask you about my favorite guitarist, is John Abercrombie, and I've seen him live so many times, and he was exactly. It was one of the first records I bought. The records you did with Hippietyville and all that current event. And I wanted to ask you how was that trio like, and how was John, at least to play with?
It's easy for me to state that John was definitely the most creative musician I'd ever met. And what I learned from him in terms of how do I put it? John taught me to relax so many of the muscle responses and muscle playing habits, and because of the timbre and the tone of his guitar, drummers we like to go to this drum a lot, the small tom, and it didn't work with John because it would be in the same register, and I could hear that we're just canceling each other out. And the devices I would use to get from one phrase to the next didn't work with him because he was just too free, and so Abercrombie was really the best drug for me. Musically, the most heartfelt playing. Many times on the bandstand, I had to fight the desire to start crying because it was just his playing was so tender.
Yeah.
And yet it was strikingly discordant or dissonant at times. The first time I was aware I was listening to John Abercrombie was on the first Dreams album.
Oh yeah.
And I remember Alan Pasqua and we were friends and housemates, in fact, at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. This is 1971. I think we're driving around and listening to the cassette of the first Dreams album, and Alan said, "What is that guitar player doing?" And when I told John about it, John, it was his modesty was like, no, that was nothing brilliant. He said, I just didn't know what I was doing. And I met him in 1973 when I was on the road with Stan Kenton, my first trip to Europe. We were in Milan, and John was also staying at the same hotel. We met in a cappuccino bar. And I was thrilled. I think he was playing with Enrico Rava.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
At the time. So I did several albums with John. We did quite a few for ECM as a trio. And then John played on my Motion Poet album.
Yep.
He played on Transition. He played on Motion Poet, and he played on Sweet Soul.
Sweet Soul, yeah.
Is he on Sweet Soul? Or is that no? That's Schofield. Excuse me. Sorry. No, John was on Transition and Motion Poet. Folks, check those out because his playing in particular on on Transition, an album, by the way, that was awarded the worst album cover. So we'll save the story about that in our next chat. There's a Kenny Werner tune called Osaka Castle.
Yeah.
And John is playing whatever his guitar synth, some kind of rolling guitar synth. It's pretty extraordinary, his solo. Again, because he was so free in terms of the tonal center and what you would expect a guitarist to do. He didn't do it. He was of that age, that generation of musicians who not only explored, but he was very comfortable.
Yeah.
Outside the tonal center. Again, we'll.
Man, like Alice in Wonderland on Current Events. I kept playing that all over and over for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I'll send you. I have that the live album we did was recorded direct to a DAT. There's very few of those portable machines were. It wasn't portable. I had a big flight case, but we traveled around with it. There was some. We had a number of takes, but Manfred decided he just wanted to take it from one. It was the last gig of the tour in Boston. But wow, we got some other takes, and I was sending all of that to John, and he was eager that let's find a way to release this. And then he passed. So Lisa, his widow, his wife, I think is interested in this, and I believe Mark Johnson is too. And I would love to try to find a way just to get these out into the world.
Yeah.
I've had this record label, Fuzzy Music, for 25 years. Our last album was an incredible 3-disc set with George Garzone.
I wanted to ask you,
Pasqua,
have you met Miss Jones, man? It's
thank you.
Burning.
It's a good record.
Good
record. But
very good.
After that, we decided, my wife was kind of tired of the record business, so I'm gonna move everything, I think, to online, and that will also include things that are not released. I'm finishing up my entire audio library of private recordings. I'm donating that to Stanford University.
Oh, wow.
Finishing up the spreadsheet on that. Thousands of items to catalog.
Wow.
So the pandemic's been a blessing. I mean, I'm getting a lot of things. I'm fixing a lot of things around the house, and also fixing a lot of things in terms of the legacy. Just looking ahead, so someone else won't have to clean up after me when I'm gone. It'll be okay. Here's some stuff we can listen to, and here's some drums we can get rid of. But I hope that won't be for another.
No, come on. No, but thanks so much, Peter, for all the beautiful stories and stuff. Like, really.
My pleasure, Samo. And thank you, and thank everyone for their patience. I'm honored to join the company that you keep. And everyone, keep wearing your masks,
Yes.
washing your hands, distance until the vaccine takes hold in our populations. And I'll see you again, hopefully in person soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Ciao.
Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.